Hello and welcome to Talk Art. I'm Sally Rain and I will be your host as we delve into the world of the artist and the art that's all around us. Talk Art is sponsored by the Silicon Valley Open Studios. During the first 3 weekends in May, hundreds of local artists open their studios to the public. For more information, you can go to the website svos.org. Our guest, Dennis Dawson, is a poet and an art educator who creates wonderful travel journals, and he is very interested in integrating art into everyday life. So Dennis would like to start with a poem, so please.
A drop of inspiration in my mind crawls slowly through the fissures in my head to meet another drop, and then combined each wiggles where the other thought has led. A trickle of imagination flows, a rivulet of rhythm in my brain. It makes a deep impression as it goes across the coarse and spare synaptic plane. Then suddenly several currents converge. The channel deepens, widens in its course until it must break free, a mighty surge, a verbal torrent, unrelenting force. And once the flood has peaked, I'm left to drain, till drops of inspiration form again.
That was wonderful. Wow. The imagery in that is just tremendous. Fantastic.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your background? How did you become a poet and an art educator? What motivates you?
I have always tried to incorporate art into everything I'm doing. I just never felt that I was really doing it the way I should or doing it as well as I should. When I was in 5th grade, there was a kid, Chris Hanks. Stupid Chris Hanks. He had stringy brown hair down to his shoulders. He always smelled like bacon. He comes up to me and he looks at my lunch bag. Now, I had drawn Snoopy on my lunch bag. Snoopy was really cool back then. He was like SpongeBob. Cool. He's still cool. He comes up to me and he says, "You're a lousy Snoopy drawer." He had terrible grammar. But more than that, he really cut me to the quick. And you would think 40 years later I would be completely over that, but I'm not.
Oh dear.
I remember it like it was yesterday. And so I wouldn't draw after that. I would doodle, I would sketch, I would do all kinds of things, but I was always afraid to say, this is a drawing. Then I got to be 30 years old. I happened to have a very long train commute from Princeton to Manhattan. So it was 90 minutes in, 90 minutes out. I read a lot of books. I taught myself shorthand. I used a portable computer sometimes, but portable computers were the size of sewing machines at the time. Then I saw this guy on television, Mark Kistler, in The Secret City. And I said, well, I could do that. So I went to a children's bookstore and I got myself a copy of Mark Kistler's Draw Squad. And this is my number one tip to anybody. If you want to learn to do anything, start in the children's section. Because they don't say chiaroscuro and perspective, they say draw shading. Or make things big and small. And when you talk to me like that, and you make it non-threatening, and you make it a lot of fun, well, actually, I can learn how to draw. And it turned out I was drawing the whole time using all those other pseudonyms for drawing.
Exactly.
And this is what actually freed me up and made me feel confident in my drawing. So at this point, I don't want any child to go through what I went through. All those years. And so I visit local elementary schools. I don't teach drawing. I don't teach them to draw. Anybody can draw. Drawing is making marks on the page, and if you don't like one of the marks because it doesn't look right, you erase it. But anybody who can move a pencil and move an eraser can draw. It doesn't take talent so much as it takes time. And the more time you invest, the better you're going to get.
Wouldn't you say, though, it also takes some patience and the ability to look carefully at something to be able to draw?
I absolutely agree with that. It takes the patience, but I think about tiger mothers who are sitting there, the helicopter moms, you will play the piano, play it, and you will enjoy it, play it, play it, play it.
Oh no.
And if a child says, wow, I really love this, and sits down and plays every day and practices without being told, that person could become a piano virtuoso. But if you have to have someone yelling at you to make you play the piano or the clarinet or play football or draw, then it's not your passion.
Right.
It's not something that's coming from within.
But everyone could use drawing as part of their creative daily life, as you said, so
Right.
to incorporate.
So I'm not going into the schools to turn all the children into artists.
No.
I just want to show them that they are artists. They already have that skill. And if they want to spend time on it and improve it,
Right.
then over time they're going to get better and better. But if it's not their passion, they should just know that they can do it if someday they decide to do it.
And so you have other books to show us
I
that you
do.
use in the classroom.
I always start with Ed Emberley. This is the simplest kind of book. They're simple icons. This is Make a World. This is a book you can use to draw absolutely everything that exists. It's got trains and animals and airplanes and various kinds of places to live. The thing about this book is anybody can succeed immediately and draw pictures that make them happy.
So using simple shapes and lines looks like.
Yeah. And I just got this book recently with the Stick Sketch School. This is a book where you just make outrageous stick figures. They're
Those
simple.
are fun.
Yeah.
I do those sometimes in my practice, for sure.
Well, the whole thing about these icons is when I'm drawing for my job, I'm not paid to make beautiful renderings and take
Right.
hours at creating them. I'm paid to draw simple icons to illustrate computer books. So I don't bother to sit and do elaborate drawings. I use these same
Right.
books. So it's not like these skills are for children and then adults have to do something different. All art is available to everybody if they're willing to try it. Then about the middle of the year, I like to move them on to Lee Ames. These are more realistic.
Those are fantastic books. He has a whole series of them. It's not just the animals. You can draw 50 anything.
You name it. He's got about 25 books in the series.
They're amazing.
They're really nice step by step. It's almost like those old things they used to have on the matchbook where it says draw spunky and you would have a circle. And then it's a perfect drawing after that. But
No.
he's got the 6 steps in between
Right.
in these books. And again, since I've taken them through the steps, the step-by-step drawings up until that point, when I get to this style of drawing, I'm able to take them through the same steps and they realize that they can do the whole thing. Toward the end of the year, I like to use this fantasy cartooning book. And what's beautiful about this is that it's all based around drawing the skeleton in simple shapes. So you'll draw the backbone and the hips as circles. But what it teaches you is how to arrange sticks and balls. What I say, you move the sticks and balls around, you move the elbow ball and the arm stick, and you put it in the right place. And this is a book that teaches children to draw action figures in any sort of pose. So it's a progression over the course of the year, starting with the simple drawings, moving into 3-dimensional drawings, more realistic drawings, and then teaching them how to draw absolutely anything in any position.
So how often do you go into the classroom and what age group do you teach?
I teach 4th and 5th grades. I teach at Fairmeadow here in Palo Alto and Sedgwick and Regnart in Cupertino. I only go in for 15 minutes to each classroom.
Oh.
And I bring a mimeographed drawing lesson. And what I do is show them 3 or 4 of the lessons as we go through. And then I say, and take this home while you're laying on your belly in front of the telly. This is something you can do. This is your home play. You do it after your homework. So after they've done their math and their interpretive dance, they're to spend about 9 hours drawing. That's all I ask.
Cool. And you have your own work to show us as well, right?
I do. One thing I love is CreateSpace.com. This is Amazon. This is a book of stories I wrote. It's about 100 pages. If I took this over to Kinko's and ran off 100 copies, it would cost me $10 a copy. It cost me $1,000. But by going through Amazon CreateSpace, I can have them make a perfect bound copy of my book for about $2.50.
Really?
I can give this away.
With the binding and everything?
Yeah, this beautiful thing, $2.50 a copy for anybody, and that's buying it yourself. It's also sold on Amazon for the full price, but $6. But for $2.50 I could buy these. These are cheaper than Hallmark cards for me to give away.
Wow.
So that's my storybook.
Let me see this.
There you are.
That's amazing. So with the color cover and printing in black and white? Wow, that's amazing.
And I thought that the color books would be much more expensive, but actually they're not.
Wow.
It's fairly
Definitely
inexpensive.
something I want to look into.
I think everybody should look into createspace.com, and I'm not getting paid for that, but I just think it's an amazing service.
That's great for artists.
This is my other book, is Santa's Night Out. You may notice a passing resemblance. I do volunteer at Christmas in the Park, guess what role? And so,
ho, ho, ho.
Yeah, it's not the homeless biker or anything like that. I am, in fact, one of those Santa impersonators. So this particular book just imagines what it would be like if Santa were to go out on a night prior to Christmas Eve, just to have a little bit of fun. With several weeks to go before December 24th, the mood was not exactly chilled up in the frozen north. While all the elves and Mrs. Claus were busy as a beaver, poor Santa hadn't much to do and suffered cabin fever. "Oh, Papa, don't just mope about. Go exercise the reindeer. They're fat and grumpy just like you. You've kind of been a pain, dear." So you can imagine what could possibly go wrong if Santa were to take the sleigh out before Christmas Eve.
I can imagine. So you have, when you said earlier that you have drawings that you do for your work. And you brought some of those for us to take a look at and how you work that into your work. So let's take a look at those now.
Oh, yes. Well, many times I'm asked to do PowerPoint presentations or illustrations. When I do these speeches, I want to be sure that I'm entertaining the people in the audience. So if I can throw in a picture like this of the monkeys acting agile during an agile presentation, it just gives the people something to look at and laugh at, and it's quick enough that they can then listen to what I have to say.
That is a little crazy.
This is someone who is being forced by the awful orcs from Oracle and the agile monkeys to write out a very troubling user story. And this is something that people find a hugely onerous task. By making fun of it this way, it actually kind of underscores the fact that it's really easy to write your user stories. This is a parser. He separates the metadata from the main data of a particular record, putting it into two separate data stores. Again, this very quickly conveys the information that I want to get across, but it's at least 78% less boring than Bean People from the clip art.
I like your style. Those are funny cartoons. I can imagine sitting in a lecture hall and seeing all of those things up there and going, "Oh, this guy is interesting."
I will say that the videos that I produce for the office get double the hits of some of the other videos produced by people who don't put cartoons in. I'm just saying.
There you go. Well, awesome. So to change the topic a little bit and talk more about how you integrate art into your own life, tell us a little bit about how you do that. What do you do in your life and maybe in your travels that incorporates art?
One of the nice things about being a business speaker is very often I get to go on business trips. And I've been to Israel, I've been to France, and wherever I go, I like to take along my travel journal. It's just a simple book. It's got those really pretty cream-colored pages with the, what do you call that? Anyway,
Binding? The sewn binding?
Well, the pretty cream-colored pages, okay. And
so you carry this.
I carry that with me. Also, wherever I go, I carry a tiny set of watercolors. And I know this is
that is very tiny.
hard to catch on the camera, but this is my well-used 20-year-old tiny portable set
Oh my
of
goodness.
watercolors. And this, I think M&M's came in this originally. It's a little red tube where I can carry water. If I don't have water, of course, I can always spit, but you don't need to know that.
Well, as artists, we have to improvise for sure. And what happens when you run out of paint in this little thing if it's 20 years old?
I take regular tube watercolors, squirt it in there, and let it dry, then fill it up again. So I've filled it again and again over the past 20 years.
I would imagine so. I would hope so. Great. So while you're traveling, how does a travel journal help you? Why do you do it?
I really am not very good at photography. I wish I were better, and I see other people and they know how to get that composition right and frame it just right. I have a perfect eye to get things just wrong. I can catch a sunset and make it look like midday. I don't know what it is. So it's really important to me, if I'm going to have pictures that are going to be good memories, that I sit and actually do the sketches. What's nice for me about the sketches is that when I sit and sketch, I really have to look at what I'm doing. I have to see this thing in front of me. Using a camera, for me, it's just looking, but when I draw a picture, I really have to study it, and I get the opportunity to study it.
Right.
So if I'm in front of a great work of art or a national monument, I can look at it in a way that makes the experience more alive for me. And as I look back at the picture, it's not just, my renderings are almost never very faithful to the original subject, but the entire picture takes me back to that time and puts me back in that space and really brings back vivid memories.
So the act of drawing and the act of sitting and taking your time in front of it is what creates the memory. Interesting. Yeah.
It's probably because you're in the right brain and you're experiencing everything around you in a different way as you're drawing these pictures.
Well, we have some images
cool.
that you brought.
I'd
Let's take a look at those now.
So I traveled actually to Milan and then to Amsterdam, but I had a weekend in Paris where I was able to go to the Louvre. The neat thing about the sculpture at the Louvre, those sculptures don't move. So if I want to take the time to draw the young boy playing with his dog or these busts of the children, I've got all the time I need. Now, I use the Dvorak method where he says, the pocket drawing book is the title of the book. He says, take a pen and draw in your journal. Don't use a pencil and then erase it and try and make it perfect. Take the risk of just drawing in pen. And the more I do it, the more likely I am to get an image that I'm happy with. They had these sculptures of a wildcat devouring first an alligator and then a rabbit. There were others, but I didn't have time to draw them all. And there to the right is Winged Victory, which is much larger in real life. But seeing these things, I remember the experience of being in the Louvre so clearly. In Amsterdam, I was able to go to the Van Gogh Museum, and I take that back. This is the one from the Louvre. This is a picture of Van Gogh. This is the one that is all turquoise and swirly. When you see a Van Gogh in person, you actually see the depth of the paint, which is a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. It's amazing. And I remember it more vividly, of course, because I've got it in my journal. This is a picture of a sculptor creating a sculpture of a gladiator. It's almost like Magritte's Ce n'est pas un pipe. Yeah, so that's, I thought that was really cool that they have this sculpture of a sculptor, and now I've got a drawing of a sculpture by a sculptor.
Yes.
Sitting underneath the Eiffel Tower, I spent 45 minutes on this picture, sketching it and then filling it in with my watercolors. I remember so vividly, this was in 2000, that I did this picture. It had the special 2000 sign on the side of it. And again, it just takes me right back to that moment.
Right.
Yeah. This is on the Mount of Olives looking down at the Holy City. You can see the mosque there with the golden dome on the right. Not a faithful rendering, but I remember being there.
Exactly, and the details and probably the smells and the sounds that were there as well, just sitting
Yes.
there.
There's the Western Wall. Walking around Milan, there's all this art just on the street, sculptures on every corner. I was amazed, and so I took some time drawing the statues that I saw. I also enjoyed the street scenes of the parking. They were really creative wherever they would put their cars. More of the street art, more of the street sculpture.
I like the way you arrange the words around the pictures as well.
One thing I did in my journal was take the time to really work on my calligraphy. So this is an enhanced Celtic script, and by practicing it in my journal, I can use it every day now.
Beautiful.
This is a detail from Il Duomo in Milan and the statue of Leonardo that's right across from La Scala. It's just so cool that I say, oh, that's the one across from La Scala.
Right,
I've just put myself in that place.
Exactly.
And this is the Arc de Triomphe. This is the other side, the one that they never look at. And I was really impressed with this scene of a man protecting an old man and a woman. Down there in the corner were a couple of people I saw playing Uno in French. And I thought, c'est bleu, c'est vert. It was a lot of fun.
That's really interesting travel journal. So tell us really briefly, before you say your last poem, tell us about your, what is poetry for you? What kind of poetry do you like, and what do you think is important in poetry?
The poetry I personally enjoy is metered and structured poetry. So I like poetry that rhymes. I like poetry that is in iambic pentameter or one of the other standard meters. A lot of people think that that's restrictive, that if you have to stick to that rhyming scheme, you're not going to use the word that you want to use. But I feel the opposite way. It makes me be more creative to find the word that's going to fit the meaning and is going to have the right sound, the right rhythm to fit into the poem. And it takes a little extra work, but I think it's worth it.
Cool. So you have a couple of poems. Why don't you read through both of them now and tell us a little bit about them at the end?
Sure. Okay. We must have overstayed our welcome, chaps. The women and the wine have disappeared. They were correct about the rain, perhaps. It stayed around much longer than we'd feared. But not to worry. We've our little boat, and though our destination isn't clear, we'll find a new location, more remote, for any place is preferable to here. The key to life is always move ahead. Remaining where we are will make us old. A stagnant man might just as well be dead. We're men of action, brilliant, brave, and bold. So onward, men, we sail for distant shores. I wish we'd thought to bring along some oars.
I think the way you read your poetry and you say it is just so dramatic. I love the fluctuation of your voice and the rhythm that you have. It's very well done.
Thank you. I will only credit Toastmasters for 90% of that.
Ah, Toastmasters.
Yes.
That makes sense. So to end with, why don't you tell us the title of this poem and just a sentence about what it's about, and then read on.
When I was in college, I worked as a tour guide, and one of the tour guides was 80 years old. And someone said,
Wow.
Marty, he's going to be rolling around 10 years after he's dead. And that made me think of Fred is dead. Fred is dead, the doctor said. The mourners crowded round the bed, and hands were wrung and tears were shed, but Fred said, I don't think I'm dead. You're dead all right, said Doc Malone. My tests and probes have clearly shown you have no pulse. Your life has flown. You're just a bag of blood and bone. At this, of course, the wife jumped in, and all Fred's friends and next of kin, which started such an awful din that Fred got up and poured a gin and tonic and turned on the set. He watched TV alone and let the others have their tete-a-tete on whether he had died as yet. The row grew louder than before. The gin ran out, so out the door went Fred down to a local store so he could buy himself some more. The sun that day was very hot, and long before the booze was bought, our hero had begun to rot. The checker at the drugstore fought to smile and act like all was well, but found she simply couldn't quell her need to ask, "Phew, what in hell is giving off that awful smell?" Fred looked around, but all the eyes had set on him, as had the flies. Fred lacked a method to disguise the smell one makes when someone dies. He bought the booze and sidled out and walked home with an air about him not unlike a week-old trout that's dorsal deep in sauerkraut. Fred went into his home, and there he found that people weren't aware that he had been out anywhere. More than that, they didn't care. He packed his bag, he downed a drink, then moved out west to start a mink farm so that other folks would think the animals had caused his stink. He's dead there to this very day, and if you should be out that way, you might step by his farm and say hello from 15 feet away.
Excellent. That is really funny. Well, thank you so much for being on Talk Art. This has been a very entertaining show.
Oh, I think so too. I will certainly watch this every week now.
Well, thank you.